This is the second now installment of, or the second part of this business of attempting to make some sort of vague template. I can't call it a template. Don't know what to call it. Some sort of guide to help you with standard solving of circular references using user-defined functions rather than copy and paste. All right, and it's currently in a file named Solar Template for Circular because one of my persons who called me said, look, he showed me this template model he had for for a solar model. It was horrible, but I said, just keep the EBITDA, keep the operations, and let's try to put this together with a flexible project financing. All right, now the idea of a circular, first thing I'm going to go through is just this idea of a circular reference. And what we're going to do is put in, I was going to do a separate video on interest during construction from fees during construction, but they're so similar, I think they're really the same thing. We can do it together. Okay, and I also put some different credit spreads and different options, and I want to talk to you a little bit while we're doing this about some interest rate issues. And I did that on all of them, and I also want to talk about the index function and the lookup function and the sum if or average if function. Don't worry about that. I'm just going to do that kind of as a side note because other people have said, well, just tell me what you really need for project finance, and you don't need more project or corporate finance or anything. Match and index. I used to be a real proponent of this match and index, and now I think, oh no, it's kind of silly. Now this idea of looking down is when we put interest during construction, we're going to go down to the period by period interest during construction here and get it from here. I almost can do it now. But then the interest during construction is going to come from the debt, our three debt tranches, and what I've done is spend a little bit of time putting the opening balance, closing balance, and interest and capitalized interest and fees on each of the separate debt tranches. And at the very bottom, I haven't done this yet. I'm going to add up all the interest during construction. So might as well do that now. Okay. I'm not distinguishing. Look, I missed one formula up there. I'm not distinguishing between whether it's capitalized right now or whether it's paid. I'm just saying we'll add the three together. Okay. And then there we go. And I might as well put interest paid down here. And then we'll have interest capitalized. Not very exciting so far. Okay, Control D. Or, you can just do it like this. You can press Control D one time and Control D one time like this, and then Shift Control R. Okay, and I better fix this thing I just saw. This interest capitalized will make the interest, total interest minus the interest paid, or we could use the switch. I'll talk about that a little bit. Now, when you go up here, this is what I was in the middle of trying to tell you about. When you go up to here, the interest during construction, we're in uses of funds. This interest during construction comes from downstairs. So this one came from downstairs, and this one came from downstairs. And when you take something from the bottom, you say, oh no, there's going to be a circular reference. And you're probably right a lot of the time, not maybe all the time. And then the next thing, the reason I put the interest rates, and one of the reasons I want to really talk to you about this, I am almost positive nobody does this, but when you have these increasing credit spreads, that's an incentive to refinance, and that risk should be coming down rather than going up over time. And the question is, should you put this in a base case model where you're going to almost certainly refinance? Should you put this increasing credit spread? Should you put this number 1, number 2, or number 3? So I'm going to do that and talk about the index function. Oh. Now, I'm a little out of breath for some stupid reason. When we talk about these interest rates, I purposely made them change, even though the change doesn't really occur during the construction period. But we're going to enter the interest as an array, not as a scalar variable. So we're going to have to go back and change the inputs to the functions. And there is this difference between what's a scalar and what's an array variable. This is one of the things that can really drive you crazy in understanding, at least, and then trying to eventually change the user-defined functions. I got that out. Oh, thank you. Now, I'm again going to talk about the importance, if you don't have a well-structured model, which I'm not sure this is that well-structured. I put, last time, this was our user-defined function. So now I'm going through all of the debt balances, shift alternate, see if hopefully we have this open and it's still set to the same kind of things. So this is going to be, hopefully, because I've got to include column A, that's going to give me a show that I've got a debt balance. By the way, in a minute I'm going to talk to you, that function could, I'm sure it slows down the model a little bit, and maybe when you're programming the model you want to turn the function off. So we're going to also have a switch to turn it on and off. But basically, let's just do our construction debt, because we've got our kind of 5 parts for the debt: the sizing, the funding, and the repayment and the interest. This is kind of the first part of the interest, and the funding a little bit. And once we have these set up with the different debt issues, you take the debt debt draws directly from the sources and uses. So we put this kind of in the right order. I'm going to refinance at COD now. I moaned a lot about this before, and I put 3 little switches up here, and I put a switch for right at the date before the COD date. We have a little bit of true and false, and we'll just repay our debt right at that level, at that amount, which is just taking the opening balance and adding any draws. And I don't think we even have to really put that in the function, so we don't have to worry about that too much. And then we have the closing balance, and we use the lookup function. Maybe I'm going to do this in a separate thing. I am going to, sorry for some of my friends who don't want to make circular references and all that, I'm going to just, why I'm showing you this is kind of silly, but I'm going to put a fundamental Excel models with all you need is lookup, index, and sum if you really don't need it, and maybe occasionally a sum product. All right, not too many Excel functions. Okay, and then we put our interest paid, and we have a little switch if it's true. Our interest, which is just always the opening balance, of course. Hope I have it here. And then the interest capitalized is, we could either take this formula or make a subtraction, really, and then we need the total commitment from this. This is why the ordering is so important. You need the total commitment. Well, this is why you need the summary sources and uses of funds so badly. Okay. And Then we do the same thing for all the 3 different tranches of debt, and we get our totals. So that's just, you've got to have a nice, clean structure. I hated doing this when you have to go from page to page. At least when you're making the model, leave it on one page. I suggest leaving it on one page for the whole thing, but oh well. Then we're going to, I'm going to try to emphasize the kind of things that are always done, or you should always work on in the user-defined functions. There are just a few things, like keeping the debt balances and switching them on and off appropriately, and accumulating them but turning them off so you don't over-accumulate them while you do the iterations. If you have no idea what I meant, that's fine. I will also put a switch at the very end to turn our dynamic function on and off, so we don't, if we're just making the model, it does slow it down a little bit, but you can just make a little thing that switches it off right at the beginning. And finally, this idea of really, think about an airplane or a rocket. We could try to get reliability absolutely perfect, and you should. You don't want the airplanes to crash. But having 2 engines is an amazing kind of reduction in the probability of crash compared to 1 engine, as long as they're independent from one another. And that's the idea of checking the model. You're kind of redoing the model, but people spend a whole lot on auditing and worrying about the model. This forces you to do a whole lot of checks and find errors. Half the time, not about 40% of the time, the errors are in the model, not in the user-defined function. And when you can't reconcile it all, it really forces you to check things. I've said that before, but it's worth discussing again. So we just made our interest during construction, and now what we'll do is start implementing that in the model. So right now I can put in the interest during construction right here. Now this interest during construction, please, that's independent of whether it's capitalized or whether the interest is actually paid. And I want to also show you this business of paid versus capitalized. To really understand the nuances of project finance, you have to see kind of what matters and what doesn't matter. And this business of interest capitalization is one of the classic things that just doesn't matter at all. Maybe we can find it some tiny little minute little thing. Now, if we then put a sum of the interest during construction, just like we did before, we're not going to get a circular reference, I don't believe. I hope we don't. Oh, we do. Hang on. This interest during construction is a function of this project cost, which drives the debt, which in turn drives this, but I was hoping we wouldn't get it from here. It seems that we will have to take this project cost and make it consistent with our function. Okay, that's not a big deal. Excuse me for not emphasizing that enough before. Okay, and then we better check all of this. So we'll have a sum and make sure this is more important. But I want to check this. You could have a COD switch somewhere. Okay, so let's why don't down here, while we did all our debt kind of analysis, I'm going to put a little COD switch. Okay. And what I'm showing you now is how you use the SUMIF. SUMIF, index, and lookup are all you need. So we put our COD, and we simply said, well, and keep the dates consistent with the top date. Don't put some dates if you can avoid it at all possible. Whoops. What did I do just now? F4 equal, I think. I multiplied it, excuse me. Oh, man. Okay, and then what if you want to find what the debt balance is right at the COD? Or, that was kind of stupid. Why don't we put the closing balance? Why don't we put the period before the COD? That would be much better. And take the amount we refinance at COD. That's our kind of closing balance. So all you do is up here, you put, so we'll kind of put a function, what's in the UDF, or computed. And we put an equal SUMIF. And the SUMIF works so well, really, with these switches. And why don't you press the F4 button and then put comma true, I'm not sure about putting 1 in there, and then just put the refinancing, okay, and then we can test this out. So this we can copy down. Whoops! Oh no! How about this? Control D like that. And then just instead of 233, we'll just go down to the senior debt 2 and find the whole line. So using SUMIF and average if and doing them with the entire row and the entire column, that's kind of the Excel stuff. Enough of the Excel stuff, almost. All right, and so these seem to be working. Oh, I put it in the wrong place. Of course, if you used it with the whole line, that doesn't matter. So I could claim that I made that mistake on purpose, which would be a lie, but okay. So enough of that. So we can even, put an equal sign, maybe. Okay, we might have to round that off eventually. All right, and that's FAST, auditing the model. Okay, and look at me, I'm a little bit reluctant to get into the user-defined function. It still is a little bit intimidating, I think. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to change the inputs. These are going to be array variables. And I don't know. Here's the thing I don't kind of like about the way I did this. I think perhaps there is a way. I experimented it, but I couldn't really figure out. You should almost put a dimension on these ones in the function, but that's going to take up some of your 128 characters and all that. So maybe it's not that good an idea. So I put interest rate. Let's just make it 1. That extra little space, what a waste that is. We should also maybe this debt percent one, that was kind of a waste too. All right, maybe later I'll change that. Okay, and then at the very end, let's put a switch, model switch, or UDF switch. And what we can do right at the very top is say, if UDF switch, and I'm going to put equal false, then exit function. Okay, oops. Well, I had to put the N there, didn't I? Okay, now you can put if not UDF switch, I think you can, and then you don't have to put the equal false. And you can also then, I said something that I think might be a little bit wrong. Remember, I don't know if you could possibly remember this. I put equal true. You don't really need this equal true. If it's the construction switch, you could just leave it, and then up here where it's equal false, and not construction switch, then we don't have to worry about the true or falses. So I'm going to experiment with this, but I'm not going to waste your time because I probably already have, because it might not work, and then I've just totally wasted your time, which I hate to do. Now, so that's what we're going to have to reread in all the interest. Now, so this again is our step one. This is all the standard initialize output variables. This is standard, and you only may have to change the dimension, e.g. the 40. Okay, maybe we'll run out of, we'll want to put more than 40 lines. Now you can see kind of what we're doing. So this is the first. Then we have step 2. And step 2 is defining the columns. And other than that true and false, that's standard 2. This is standard 2. And this is standard, so you can read the entire. I'm glad I'm reading this to you. Now, okay, you know what I mean by reading the entire line without F4. You know, the F4s. Okay, I hope you understand what that is. And then we get to step 3, where we start the iteration loop. And the first part of the iteration loop is before going around construction or operation. I'm going to put or operation because in a minute, in a year, we're going to put in the sculpting of the debt. Now this project cost difference, again, I'm reviewing that. That's the last time we computed, the last time we computed, ooh, that was horrible. The project cost is $999. But then we're going to recompute somewhere down at the very end, I hope, that we're going to we computed the project cost. Now we got to be very careful. Okay, this is the end of the, sometimes maybe it's good to do something like this. End of iteration loop. Okay, so we really, really kind of see our different parts. Perhaps that would be a nice kind of way to document the whole thing. All right, and then so this is the start of the iteration loop, and then we need somewhere down here, we computed the total project cost. All right, and then the next time we compute the project cost, it's going to be a little bit different, and a little bit different, and a little bit different, and perhaps this total project cost, we might have to adjust it a little bit, because the total project cost is going to be straight kind of from the, not necessarily, absolutely necessarily because of interest capitalized, but it might be. See, I put less interest capitalized here, And it's not going to be less interest capitalized here. So we're going to have to really, we should have kind of done it here. Now, to do that, whoops, I didn't mean, oh no, sorry about that. I couldn't get the formatting. Okay, enough. This one, okay, is going to be the sum. So we should somewhere add up all the direct expenses, add up all the fee, add up all the development fees, add up all the interest during construction. Now, this is something that is common. If you were going to start accumulating things, and down here, I've even got accumulated IDC and accumulated, and I didn't put down here accumulated development fees. Equal. Maybe, my Napoleon saying about dress me slowly, I'm in a hurry might be a really good saying again, because development fees underscore P. If we, get any of these spellings wrong, that's the most common thing, and especially when you're a little bit have mental problems like I do, that can, where you can't remember things and you've got dyslexia and you combine dementia with dyslexia and all that stuff, it can cause some problems. And then we can also kind of at the very, before we get even started with our loop, we can, let's just practice this. So down here we have a, before we're getting into the loop, this is all before we get into the loop around the construction. Here we can make another little loop and say, well, accumulated capex equal capex plus the and then we have to find our capex, and that doesn't affect that accumulation. You don't have to kind of redo. That's always going to be the same thing. So remember, down here when we started our total funding needs, really, development fees, upfront draws, funding equals capex, and we put a little a there because it was an array variable, okay? And then put next. Now, this is totally unnecessary, but I'm just in case it's kind of silly, but I would put capex equals 0. So we make sure we're not doing that. And then we put all of the, now when we put our project cost, let me say it correctly, is not the total funding, it's the accumulated capex plus the accumulated development fees plus the accumulated IDC. Okay, you need to do that. Now, when you do this, I'm trying to emphasize a couple of things here. These are a couple of the points I really wanted to make, is the debt balance and common things. This would be a common thing. We're almost always going to have, this is where these kind of circular reference resolutions get a little bit more complicated is we're almost always going to have some kind of, we always will have an iteration loop. But then we'll also, in addition to the iteration loop, this is the now loop around construction. Period. And I'm sure I hope you see that we're going to also have a loop around the operation period when we work on our debt sculpting. Okay? And up here it says accumulated IDC. Okay? And I'm going to leave that one. And we also want to put accumulated development fee. And I hope I didn't put the S in. Can you remember? If you can remember whether I put the S in or not, that's really cool. And I didn't put it in here, and I didn't put it in there. Okay? And all of the things you're going to accumulate, we have to reset to 0. Okay. Otherwise, they'll get accumulated each time you run the iteration loop. Okay, and that's one of the first kind of mistakes I kept making. And the same issue occurs with the debt balances. Okay, because the debt balances we're going to accumulate. We're going to add the debt draws to the debt balances. And this is a common kind of thing. This always happens. And this is all of our analysis. Right up here, this is all, yes, of analysis corresponding, that wasn't a count as a swear word, to the sources and uses analysis, to the initial aggregate or summary sources and uses. And I think if you cannot see that this is going to force you to get the model structured, I hope, well, whatever, that was kind of if, that was like a threatening, stupid thing like my sister would tell me. Sorry about that. She'll never watch the video. Where was I? Okay, you putting this, I used to do these models without putting a summary sources and uses together right up at the front. If you don't have that, I can't believe this. And the other thing, I think you can see how you can add debt or subtract debt very easily, but there's going to be one exception. Okay, now, we have these debt balances, and these debt balances we already worked on. The debt balance is equal to the debt balance you had last time plus the debt draws. This is like the closing balance, and it's kind of towards the end of the loop, I hope, because this is the end of the loop, the loop around construction. And that's going to be very common. I cannot see that you wouldn't have something like this. Okay. And all of these, and then this is just for output. Okay. I don't know. We haven't made the DSRA yet, but this is, come on. Okay. Okay, so that's not very important. But this should be at the end of the loop. It is like the closing balance. Now, before we do the if we haven't made the closing balance up here, right kind of at the beginning, maybe I'll do it after the development fees. Now we can put the interest during construction on the opening balance. Okay. How am I doing for time? I was really hoping, I'm already at 35 minutes, and I am sorry, these videos are going to be longer. There is no way, if you're going to really do this carefully, to make them a little bit less. I'm sorry, I'm not going to skip around. I'm going to shoot. This is a mechanical video. And then we multiply this. So to get the, let's get the IDC on the first debt 1. How about I'll just do it like this. And that will be the debt balance 1 multiplied by the I rate 1. But that one, and I better put an A here. So let's see what we called it. Okay. Up here. This was up here. IRT1A. It wasn't so much difference than when I had it. Okay. IRT1A. I think I did it right. Oh my God. Wonders never cease. Now, let's just talk about the next thing. When you would copy this down, we could put I rate 2. So doing it on 2 and 3, in a way, when you do it in Excel, it's kind of a pain. Because copying and all of those different debt issues and all of that in is kind of a pain. This is really easy. But you would have to be really careful. I'm going to put another comment here. You have to be careful here. If you eliminate debt 2 or debt 3, you must not put the formula there, because if you didn't let's say this whole thing, we don't need to read debt 1 or debt 2 or debt 3 here. The kind of nice thing is you could just delete these things or add another one. Adding one wouldn't be all that hard either, would it? But if you delete this one, and then if it wasn't an array variable, you would have no problem leaving that in. There would be no problem whatsoever in leaving this formula in if this was not an array variable. But if it's an array variable like this, it needs to find it, and it's gonna, I believe, go crazy. I didn't even look at me make this mistake. Okay, so that's how we get our IDC, and then we can put our IDC, and I hope I put it like this. Of course, if you're better at this than me, you could put, month or construction period, or it could be named anything you want. I'm trying to type and talk at the same time. That seems to be getting more difficult for me. Okay, we have the 3 things now. I hope I put the IDC period here. If I spelt that wrong, it would actually not even be that much of a problem, because it would tell me that when we're trying to run the model. Okay, so we have our IDC period here. And then we need to add in the IDC period into our funding needs. Oops. Okay. And when we go to our accumulated IDC, it better be adding that for us. And up here, we put in the accumulated IDC as an output. Okay. And if we really wanted to kind of, maybe we should put kind of in row 27, we can put the kind of project cost thing. So maybe first even though hang on. I'll put it in 25. So we have the total project cost, but these are not array variables. These are just going to be kind of across. So in column 2, I'm going to put development fee, and hopefully we can start to audit and see, well, what's going wrong if I've made a mistake. And then in 26, I can put, 25 still, sorry about that. In column 3, I can put the accumulated IDC. Okay, so this is, each time I'm doing these videos, I'm kind of reviewing, and what I'm going to obviously do, I think I'm going to have to make a separate one on the fees, because this is really getting too long. Now, let me just take a tiny break. Okay, sorry. Now, we're going to have to make our function again and change the variables we define. And I would like to assert to you once again that just clicking on the entire line for this periodic interest rate, because I didn't divide the periodic interest rate by 12 and doing all sorts of things. Now, I suppose you could get a little philosophical here and say, I should have put these interest rates done in, and then I could have checked the whole model, but I'm going to just read these interest rates in, and while I'm at it, I'm also going to read in these commitment fee percents, perhaps. Okay, so what you go is you find our whole big function that okay, and then shift control right arrow, shift control down arrow, F2, shift F3 to get all the function arguments. But now we're going to go back and redo the interest rates. So we have an interest rate for number 1, okay? And we'll do exactly what I just told us to do. We'll just click on that. Interest rate. Sorry about this. Okay, and how about this? So we put the periodic interest rate in here. And then we don't have to change anything else. Now, when I'm going to change things around a little and put some additional things in, oh no, so I'm going to get interrupted. When I do this, when you add more variables in, you might have to read all of the things in, which is obviously a pain. Okay, I'm going to pause the video just for a second and add the rest. Now, the last thing I put in was the UDF switch. I forgot to kind of put in a space for it, so I'm putting it right here in F40. And then you press OK. Now, don't worry. Okay. The first thing we better do is, look at me, how nervous I am. F40, I'm going to put true here, because it really didn't know what to do. All right, and this is our, now, I hope that we can insert a line here. And this is our UDF switch. How about run the circular? So if this is if this is switched off, then in case you're, and it seems to be a tiny bit slow. I'm not blaming this on the video or anything else. That's running it. Now, that might have been the problem, because the good news is, here is our user-defined function, and we didn't have any values, okay? And then if we look at the output this is really dangerous. I should be switching this model off. If we look at this, this thing, it has the total project cost, the total development fee. So I could put project cost / development fee / IDC, and then eventually we'll put all the rest of these things here. Okay. And then right up here we'll put in the we put in the total construction. Now, why don't I put a check? So this is I don't know how to do this really, but I'm gonna for now just sum up all of these things, and we get the same number. How good news is that? And then over on the interest during construction, we have this, and we now our computed is the same as our actual. So this was kind of surprising, maybe because I went through it a little bit slowly on a video, but it worked the first time. That's a very, very rare event. Now, since this is kind of a long video, I'm going to work on the interest capitalization and the fees in part number 3 of this circular reference video. Now, I hope once again, but let me just, before I finally go back here, if you go to the circular reference page, okay, I haven't put this all together, but watching the video is kind of silly. Maybe it gives you a little bit of an introduction. So I put the kind of first video I did here. And then I tried to discuss some issues with getting the arrays right. I haven't finished this, but the idea will be that I'm going to put a lot of the parts to the, of course I'm going to put the file here. I'm going to put a lot of the parts to discussing this right up front. Right up here. So you can read. I think it would be an easier way to do this would be to read what's going on rather than to just rewatch this horrible video. All right, so that's enough.